So my guest today is the lovely Jacqueline Kelly. Now, Jacqueline is the creator of Our Brave Hearts in Ireland, supporting mums who feel lost in the transition from being the woman they used to be to being the mother that they are now. As a mum herself, Jacqueline has experienced firsthand the challenges surrounding that journey. And she has an advanced diploma in personal leadership and executive coaching, and is also a D Martini Method Facilitator. She's very kindly agreed to chat with me today about her journey. Jacqueline, thank you so much for joining me. It's so nice to have you on.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you.
Just for people who don't really know much about you, just tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. So I set up Our Brave Hearts. I registered my company at the end of 2017. I didn't really start, I suppose, officially coaching until 2018. But my whole business, my whole coaching has been born out of my own experience as a mother. In 2013, I had my first child, my son, Fionn, and it had been a beautiful pregnancy. I read all the books. I thought I knew what to expect. And then I had him and I actually became a mum. And I realised very quickly, having gone through a beautiful pregnancy, textbook, no problems, to a very managed birth. At the time, just after the birth, I would have definitely said I had quite a lot of severe birth trauma. And at the time, I felt like my whole world came crashing down around me, because the expectations that I had gone into birth and early motherhood were pretty much a fantasy. And I think a lot of women, since that day and until now, this is what a lot of women are sold, this fantasy. And we've been almost conditioned into it from a very young age. So after I had Fionn, we struggled on for a few months. I tried to breastfeed. That didn't work out well. Fionn had an undetected lip and tongue tie. So I was already feeling really run down, really guilty about the birth. And then at this, just all these other factors kept coming at me. Every time I tried to speak openly about how I was feeling, at the time, there's a real stigma on mothers in terms of you're either postnatally depressed or you're happy. And if you don't fall into either of those camps, then there's something not right. So I was very aware of this at the time, because I just knew something wasn't right, but I knew with certainty I wasn't postnatally depressed. So time went on and I got pregnant with my second child. And at the time, I really struggled to connect with my pregnancy. So I remember having a discussion with Stuart, my husband at the time, and I made a flippant comment, a kind of ha. I can't really imagine it beyond the birth. So with him, we sat down and he's like, this sounds like something perhaps you need to work on. So I went to see a counsellor for a few sessions to work on, it turns out, was the birth trauma from Fionn. And it was invaluable for me at the time, because what it did was really allow me to get to the root of what was holding me back from connecting with this, my unborn baby. So that helped me turn a corner, and I went on to have a very beautiful healing home birth with Molly. I wasn't managed, there was no interventions, and it just allowed me to see the possibility. And so after that, then I'm now a mother of two. Motherhood is still not what I thought it was going to be. And I remember thinking at the time, like, surely this just can't be me. But there didn't seem to be much conversation happening at all the little coffee mornings, or the chats with friends that I met through these coffee mornings. There was a real, in my perception, there was a real level of, it was superficial. And I really just wanted to talk about how hard it was, how difficult I was finding it, the impact it was having on all the different areas of my life. But I just felt I was too intense, or I was way different than everybody else. And ultimately, that is what led me to creating this coaching company, because I'm not alone. I was never alone. And the more I was able to figure that out, the more women I came across who really, like so many of us, are just waiting for somebody else to start the conversation, because we often don't want to be that one. And the minute you start the conversation, and I'm sure you know this very well, Claire, about any contact, the minute the conversation started, all of a sudden people are like, oh, that's me, or I feel the same. So ultimately my own experience is what has driven me to provide a service for mothers that I didn't know was available when I was knee deep in it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, like you're saying just then, I mean, one of the reasons I got into helping women and working with women was because I went to a retreat where I heard all these stories emerge and they were all the same.
Yes.
But no one knew it until someone started talking about it. And then there was just like this overwhelming relief that we were all feeling the same way. But in the same breath, it's kind of upsetting that we're all feeling the same way and no one knows.
Yeah, it's like, what does this even mean then? If everybody feels like this, why are we not talking about it?
Yeah, it's crazy. So did you just sort of go off and get coaching before you opened it up, or did you already have a coaching background?
No. So my actual, I suppose, academic or life experience background really is, I'm from Scotland. I grew up in Scotland, finished my bachelor's degree in 2004 and went off to see the wide world and loved it. So went off traveling and eventually ended up in Vietnam teaching English. And when I was there, I met this Irish backpacker, and that was in 2005, I think. Yeah. So when I was there, I met this Irish backpacker and we became friends. And then I had already applied to come to Ireland to study. So I came to Ireland to study, to do a master's in humanitarian action, because at that point in time, that really was where I imagined my career and my life would be, was working overseas in the humanitarian sector, particularly in emergency contexts. So came to Ireland, studied, hooked up with an Irish backpacker, who's now my husband, and went overseas again. And then came back from that, got married, had babies, and had never even heard of coaching. And what you said there about the treat is so interesting, because I had gone, after I had my second baby, Molly, she would have been coming up for a few months old, and I went to this retreat, a weekend event. And it was like, for the first time in a long time, I was able to really be open to what I was seeing and hearing. So that weekend, it was such a turning point for me, because so many women that I spoke to, each told me, it seemed like out of nowhere, their birthing experiences and the challenges they faced in motherhood. So like you, like that experience of, I was like, oh, what? So I knew in that moment, I was like, I'm going to do something about that, because I felt with absolute certainty that this is what I'm supposed to be doing now. Yeah. I knew I didn't want to go into counselling. And there's a big difference between counselling and coaching. Coaching is very much present day and forward facing. And we set goals, and, we really look at strategies and techniques to help a person continue moving forward. So from that weekend on, with the support of my family, I looked into coaching qualifications, how I could do it with an almost 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And I did it really just to go through the process. And so with that, you have to coach and be coached. And then since then, I've always been working with my own coach, coaching up. I get coached as well as running my own, I coach women as well.
Yeah, and so you're a D Martini facilitator. Now, yes. For people who aren't aware of the D Martini method, are you able to kind of shoehorn it into a very brief description?
I will try.
Challenge.
So the D Martini method is, I know I'm slightly biased because of the impact that it has had on my own life, but I first heard of this. I attended an event, a seminar. It's called the Breakthrough Experience. I attended my very first one in London in February of 2017, and it's a full weekend event. And I dragged my best friend here with me. She's also a coach, and she signed up. So both of us went off on this adventure, not really quite knowing what we were getting ourselves into. And at that weekend, and when we talk about turning points in our lives, and this was like a huge awakening, basically. So there's a man called Dr. John D Martini, and he has spent his life studying human behavior, and he has created the D Martini Method, which is essentially a tool. It's systematic, it's very methodical, it's a series of questions, and there's no dodging it. When you get into, say, an event like the Breakthrough Experience, there's nowhere to go but forward, and you have to keep just doing the work. So it takes you through these series of questions, and ultimately you get the breakthrough, which when you get to that point, based on the questions that you have been asked and facilitated through, you realize that all these things in our lives, all these stories that we've told ourselves about why things are the way they are, why my life is the way it is, why my relationship is the way it is, why my finances are the way it is, all of a sudden we begin to see that there's a huge underlying order. And with the D Martini method, it allows us to see the other side of the coin, because there is no one-sided coin. But so often that's all we look at, and that's all we look for. And so we continue to drag all these stories and excuses and justifications as to why things are the way they are. So that weekend in London blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind. And all of a sudden I was left so grateful for things that I had actually felt very guilty about and very ashamed about, or had a lot of resentment towards people. And all of a sudden I found myself heart open, full of love, and laughing at things that I had actually been using as an excuse. But when I really looked at it, I could see how all those things in my past they had served me. And one of his very famous ways of thought, he always says, it's recognizing that things are on the way and they're not in the way. And it's such a simple expression, but it's the impact that it can have when you change the mindset is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so after that February, me and my pal, who I had dragged over, she had just as big as an experience as me. We came home back to Ireland and we were like, mind blown. This is different to coaching. It works hand in hand in coaching, but it's slightly different. No, it's not slightly different. It's hugely different. You can work D Martini method, you can work coaching, and you can certainly bring in aspects of the D Martini method into your coaching. So we then flew out to South Africa that August to become certified in the method itself. And now we like continuous professional development. We facilitate at Dr. D Martini's events when we can, and then we go back for retraining as well in order to make sure that we're up to date. And then I bring a huge amount of the method into the type of coaching that I do with mums.
Yeah, lovely.
Yeah.
So I find it fascinating. It really is. It really is. And they're incredibly intense. But
yes.
Yeah,
I'm sweating thinking about it.
Yeah. Even though.
Yeah.
So what are the main issues you tend to see mums struggling with?
Well, geez, I actually did a workshop last night, and there's no great shock that it's the topic was around guilt. Now, guilt is universal. So it just so happens I work specifically with mothers, a particular type of mother as well, because that's who I personally feel that I serve the best at this time in my life. But across the board in motherhood, definitely there is mum guilt. And we were talking about it last night to the point where there was a lovely quote by an Irish author called Edna O'Brien, and she talks about, the guilt and the magnificence and the depth of the guilt iceberg. And so we did a visual around it last night. So if you can imagine the top of the iceberg, and that's where we get all these funny jokes and the little memes that are going around that any mother will be familiar with, talking about, not being able to go to the bathroom on your own, not be able to go out for 10 minutes, the housework, etc. So at the very tip of the iceberg, we have the very public version of guilt. But underneath that, like any iceberg, underneath the water, we have the guilt and the hidden shame around these things that we joke about. And certainly from a motherhood standard, I think the jokes, although I'm a huge fan of jokes and humour, especially dark humour, in this particular context, what it does, I think, is continue to allow almost just the acceptance of, but it goes hand in hand with motherhood. So guilt is a huge one. And I think it does go hand in hand because we've got to the point where we believe that. I think it's a belief that's definitely worth challenging and questioning, because so often so many mothers are crippled by the fact that I can't go out because my partner, doesn't know what to do, or it's so much effort for me to even leave the house to have the whole thing set up that it's just not even worth it. And so it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy. And then so the knock-on effect of that then, in terms of the mum feeling run down, losing her friends, no social life. So guilt is a huge one. Another one, and I'd say for most women, is most people, is the comparison trap.
Oh, yes. That's a goodie.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody, you know, we all pay lip service to it and we all say, oh, I know Pinterest and Instagram's not real. And again, that's the socially acceptable thing to say. But behind closed doors and in the private part of our life, we're still there using it as a weapon to beat ourselves with. And the logical part of our mind is saying that's not real. But the very human part of us that is hurting and is already perhaps feeling not 100%, then all of that is just, it's more fuel for the fire. So the comparison trap in terms of, you know, there's this whole mummy war thing as well that social media brings out, just like often they talk about women against women, like pitting women against each other in terms of men and jobs, and so it continues in the motherhood sphere in terms of, well, I breastfeed, I don't breastfeed, I feed my children all organic food from, you know, mother nature, and I don't. So this divide, I question where the divide, who benefits from this divide, because it's certainly not mothers.
Yeah.
No.
So with the coaching you've been doing, Jacqueline, what sort of success stories have you seen?
Oh, I mean, certainly for my own success story first, Claire, having gone into coaching and having actually realised the power behind accepting what is, actually accepting your reality, not fighting it. And just because you accept it doesn't mean that you condone it and that you have to stay there forever. But that's one of the first key massive wins that a lot of my mothers will feel. That's their first kind of realization, in that in order for us to leave where you are, in order for you to truly think about how to get to where you think you want to be, let's just really talk about what's going on right now. How do you really feel? And that's where they have an opportunity to just really talk about, well, I feel so overwhelmed, I feel like a bad mum because I don't want to be with my children all the time. My relationship's suffering because I've no interest. I'm so touched out with the little ones. I might not even had a shower in 2 days if it's a stay-at-home mum, particularly with a new baby. And all of a sudden, these demands are just so much. So for them to finally be able to say it without judgment is massive, because all of a sudden they realize, like what we talked about a minute ago with so everybody feels it, we just don't say it. All of a sudden they find themselves in this whole realm of, this is motherhood, this is the reality. It's not the pin-up version that we've been sold. This is it, what you have. Look for the beauty, look for the perfection, because you can't see it when we're so busy always looking up to the pedestal version that we see in magazines, we see online, etc. So from there, it just blows it open, because a huge part of the coaching I would do as well brings in Dr. D Martini's values. And when he talks about values, what he talks about it in such a phenomenal way, in terms of not values in a sense of so societal norms, like, you know, I really value honesty and good timekeeping, and these are wonderful, absolutely, but your values, these are more, they're so unique, they're like a fingerprint. No two people can have the same value. So if there's over 7 billion people in the world, that means there's over 7 billion realities, because our values dictate our reality. So what we're looking at is based on a whole lifetime of filter that's been built up with, you know, teachers, preachers, mothers, fathers, your pals at school, your sports clubs you went to, and those beliefs run so deep. And sometimes when I work with a mum and we go through the Dr. D Martini's value determination process, I always remind them, like, don't write what it is that you think you should write. Don't say what it is you think is the right answer. Just be honest. Be honest, because you'll see that your life demonstrates your values. So all of a sudden these women are like, I've worked my whole life. Like one woman in particular, phenomenal, very powerful woman, loved her job, has always loved her career, very high powered position. And when she became a mum, she said, I feel like I'm so torn. I'm neither a great mum and I'm no longer great at my job. And I can't be both. All she wanted to do was go back to work. That's what she had done. She said, I've worked so hard to get to that position. I love it. I think about it all the time. I love the challenges, the responsibility. I love everything about it. That doesn't mean I don't love my child. Well, we got to that realization, but she felt that in admitting that, it somehow meant that she loved her child less. And so the more we explored it, and in actual fact, that particular dynamic in that relationship, her husband he was more at home with the child, and he loved that. So when she was finally able to accept that it's neither good nor bad, it just is, that you are actually the driver, the breadwinner in your family dynamic. And in order for your husband to do what he loves to do and which works for the family, you doing what you love to do allows and facilitates all that to happen. So what is it you feel guilty about? And we were both like, man, what is this? What is there I feel guilty about? Like, you're doing what you love, your husband's getting to do what he loves, your baby is the happiest, and yeah, underneath all of this, you're there beating yourself up because it doesn't conform to what society tells us the family structure should be.
Yeah.
So, oh, I could talk all day, because that was a big one. But then even from the little ones, little successes where all of a sudden a woman is able to understand the differences between her and her partner's values, to the point where it's not a personal attack when the partner's doing this or that, but we build up all this huge resentment, and so the communication breaks down. But when all of a sudden they become empowered to realize, this is me and you are you, and let's look at how we can communicate, how best that we can talk about this without going in with all these hidden resentments that are just waiting for an opportunity to come up.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's absolutely fascinating. I mean, I could chat forever with you about this, but what are your plans for the rest of the year, Jacqueline? What's going on?
Well, that's a great question, because the way our Brave Hearts has been running so far, it's kind of evolved very organically, and with everything that's going on in the current climate right now and everybody going online, the majority of the coaching that I had done had already been online, because I work with mums, and mums, they're either working outside the home, so they're not available to me during the day, or they're at home and their kids are at home, and then they've got schools. And it's the same as myself. My children are 6.5 and 4.5. So the majority of my coaching has always been done from 8 o'clock in the evening onwards, online. And up until this point, I have done one-to-ones, but I mainly do group coaching programs. And the one I had been running, my most successful one, was 10 weeks. But at the end of the 10 weeks, what I have realized, and what was advised, and what I was told about way back, and I never really listened, as we always do. You're like, no, that doesn't make sense. I'm not going to listen to that sage advice yet. At the end of the 10 weeks, what is happening is that we've built up this huge, beautiful space and energy and trust between this phenomenal group of women, and then it's gone.
Yeah. And
really what my plans are for this year is to look at structuring and organising a longer term, a 9-month. And the significance of the 9-month is not lost on me, in terms of, what it takes to birth, what it takes to create. And it's the same for ourselves, to fully embody the concepts that we work on in the group coaching program. It's much bigger than 10 weeks. So that's still new for me. It's still coming up, but it's exciting. And that's really where I hope to drive our Brave Hearts in the direction of.
Cool. And do you just do group, or you do one-to-one as well?
I do one-to-one. Often what happens is that my one-to-one women will inevitably end up in the group coaching, because in a group coaching program, in any group, and when you have a group of women and they all show up, nobody's really quite sure yet what's going to happen or how far things are going to go, and that excitement and nervousness and emotion, and I'm just going to be cool, and then all of a sudden time goes by, and you see the fragility and the power and the rawness of another woman's experience, and it opens up so much opportunity and potential for you, because you become so inspired by it, but also comforted by it, because again it links back into I kind of feel as a theme emerging for you and I, is that we all feel these things, but we're just not talking about it. And sometimes it takes somebody else's words or the way somebody else describes it for you to be able to say, that's it. I just didn't have those words.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So Jacqueline, where can people go to find out a bit more about you?
Well, my website, which will be changing over the next few while, but that's my website is ourbravehearts.ie, and then Facebook, of course. And my main, I suppose the main place that I show up a lot on is Instagram. I love it. There's where you can find me on Instagram on Our Brave Hearts. It's kind of like it's not coachy. It really is my own experience, my own thoughts of being a mother. So it's a very personal and professional page. So I don't know how well that goes, but so far it feels right for that. Where I share a lot.
Yeah.
So, which of course has its benefits and drawbacks, but that's generally where most people find me, is on Instagram.
Fantastic. And then for people who are interested, I will put links to how you can get hold of Jacqueline in the comments as well. Yeah. So Jacqueline, before we finish up, with everything that's going on at the moment, are there any sort of top tips you can give to mums out there who are perhaps struggling a little bit?
Yes, 100%. The question, the comments that I get most from most days, again, it's this: there is such an insidious, overwhelming, heavy but invisible guilt, because they're either not homeschooling or they're not homeschooling enough, or dinners have gone out the window and kids are eating packets of crisps for breakfast. And how am I supposed to do it all? How am I supposed to teach my kids, work from home, or look after the house, mind the baby, chat to my husband, blah, 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 blah. And so the one thing I can say is this isn't going to last forever. We need you to survive, whatever it takes right now. This is not a normal situation. And I really would encourage anyone, particularly mums, to challenge your thoughts. Don't believe them, because they trick us and they will reinforce that you're doing something wrong. And there is no wrong. There is no manual. There is certainly a societal belief of what a good mother is, but that doesn't exist. So really, to challenge your thoughts, challenge the guilt, ask yourself, is this true? Yeah. And fundamentally, we know that it's not. You're not a bad mother. You're not a bad person. And you are doing the best that you can with what you have right now. And also, that's what we encourage in our children. It's what we want to instill in them. All you can do is your best. So that is the same for mums. All you can do is your best. And that best will look different every day. I have great days where I'm winging this and I'm just like, long may this continue. And the very next day I'm like, who was she that even thought that this was somehow manageable? So everybody's in it together.
Yeah, that's the thing. Whatever question you ask yourself, your subconscious mind will give you an answer. Yes. So if you're asking yourself, why am I such a bad mum? You're going to get an answer. Yeah. It's about asking a better question.
Yeah, absolutely. Why am I such a great mum?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I know. So powerful.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. Jacqueline, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. I could spend hours doing it. Unfortunately.
Oh, thank you. You too, Claire. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for having me, Claire.
I really appreciate your time, and that's just been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.
Bye.